Tri-City Sports Now. I'm Marky Billson. Well, Nashville, Tennessee, the state capital of Tennessee, and I do realize that sometimes I think we do talk a little bit more about Tennessee, about Nashville pro sports teams than we should. I'm the guy who says, the Titans aren't really a home team. But then again, I was on the Predators Stanley Cup run more than anybody else in the market. It's because I like hockey, okay? But I'm talking to more and more and more and more people around here, especially the youth, that like soccer. And I've always wondered a little bit why, and I've tried to theorize, and here's what I've come up with, 2 ideas, really. First of all, I think that over the years, and, there's always been soccer in America. I mean, I can remember being a little boy, and it was big news that Pele was going to come and play for the New York Cosmos. I mean, that was Pepsi ads that you would see. Pele, Pele. How is Pele known so much in America? It's from that little, I'm going to introduce soccer to the area. But truthfully, soccer had been around in the United States, and it had really been taken from immigrants who had come to America. Give you a little known fact. Ebbets Field, home of the Brooklyn Dodgers. After the Dodgers moved away to Los Angeles following 1957, Dodgers still owned the stadium. They still had a lease on it. And they still tried to schedule events even from Los Angeles. Now, obviously, they weren't coming back to play any baseball games. That would have been a kind of interesting thing if they could have worked something out to have said, well, we'll leave you now. We'll play like 1 game a year here or something. Or maybe a series. But, we're playing a football stadium right now. I know we thought that was too small, but this is too big. We just don't know. Oh, Dodger Stadium. We'll play in that forever. But the little-known fact is that Ebbets Field became a soccer venue in its last 2 years of existence. There are a few college baseball games played there. They had a demolition derby, I think, in the place. But it was primarily a soccer venue playing, and this is New York City with a large immigrant population. And there were soccer games even in that late 1950s era in America, that drew as many as 21,000 fans, which was more than what the Dodgers were drawing when they were still in Brooklyn, unless they were in the World Series or, big game or something like that. But, regular Wednesday evening game, no, that wasn't going to draw 21,000. Even in today's era, it's a little bit difficult to draw. Well, they draw more fans today than they did back then, but yeah, Wednesday night games are generally not going to be sellouts. You know that. Anyway, but it was a soccer venue, is what I'm trying to say. So we can actually trace back American soccer quite some time. I mentioned the Cosmos. I mentioned, Tony Meola, Alexei Lalas, the World Cup in '94. There's a bit of American soccer history. But the MLS has been around now for a generation, and Nashville's getting a team. And the thing is that I go out and I talk to people and I say, we want to be here on Tri-City Sports Now. We want to have a little more of a youthful feel than some of our competitors on this show, which I'm sure that the consultants and all that love it then when I do my things like I talk about my passion for the history of baseball or something of that nature and all that. Let me tell you, the 1903 World Series, the Pirates would have won it if one of their pitchers hadn't been institutionalized. That's actually true. During the World Series, one of their pitchers actually was institutionalized, lived the rest of his life in a sanatorium. There you go. There's the story of the day. See where I think that baseball history can be kind of interesting? But now soccer really does seem to be having, and it was always played, you always played. A lot of times it seemed like, soccer moms and, bumblebee soccer. That was something. I want my young child to start playing sports and getting his exercise early. I've heard, 3-year-olds playing bumblebee soccer. Does that draw some fandom? Perhaps, but, I mean, I think a lot of people, I know of people who played in the NFL who actually started off as soccer players and then moved to football because peer pressure, and they said, you got to play the real game here. You're an American. Play that ball game. Play the football game. Player in question, I once did a big story on him, Mike Lorello, who isn't a big name, but he played a little bit, had a cup of coffee with the Steelers, and he was a starting defensive back for West Virginia in the previous decade. So, I mean, very legitimate ball player. I mean, he made the pros. He started off, his best sport was soccer. More locally, and again, I'm going to have to give you the historical references here, but anybody remember Basile Shabazz? How could you forget with a name like that? Played with Dimitri Young with the Johnson City Cardinals about 25 years ago. And he was known as the best athlete on the team. And primarily it was his soccer exploits that attracted everyone's attention. Never forget that, how they would announce his name in Cardinal Park, Basile Shabazz! Shabazz! You hear Shabazz twice. That's the way the PA announcer at the time would announce it. That's very memorable. But these are soccer players, American soccer players. I looked to two reasons why I think soccer is now taking off with millennials. One is the game is pretty much going to be played in 2 hours. It's rigidly timed. You might have some extra time, but 2 hours, it's going to be over. I think there's something to be said for that. Baseball, they talk about it lasts too long and all that. Nobody said that in 1948. That's when World Series games lasted an hour and a half. Look at the records. Yeah. And we've talked a lot about reasons why that is. I think the DH, certainly TV, has been a reason. But, the idea is that I think that there's less, hey, get the ball and throw, that there may have been in previous generations. More relief pitching. And those are things that I think that baseball should go away from. Yeah, have the pitcher emphasize the complete game more, that sort of thing. Ban the DH. I think you'll find the length of games will shorten immensely once you do that. All right. But soccer doesn't have that problem. The number two reason I think is a little more disturbing, and I think that the United States, the youth of America, there's less patriotism. Soccer was once thought of by an American audience much the same way that, let's say, hockey was thought of by a Southern audience. Oh, that's not our sport. That's not our culture. We don't want that. Pele, we have two names around here. Just ask Sharon Madonna. But, I told a funny right there. But I think what you have now is less of that and more in a younger generation of wanting to be more international than simply American. Therefore, soccer finds its niche. Now it's finding a team in the state capital, Nashville. It'll be announced later on today. Governor will be there. How did Nashville, which among MLS markets would be somewhat small, land a franchise? And also still with, somewhat stereotypes, I guess, Nashville really is an all-American city. You're Nashville, you start thinking country music, right? What's more American than that? You don't think, South Florida and the Sound Machine or something like that. You don't think, the polka music of Midwestern communities with the Polish immigrants or something like that. You don't think of that. And you think of distinctly American music. You think of a distinctly American town. All right. According to Sports Illustrated, they wrote this earlier in the year, that Nashville really impressed a lot of people, and one of the reasons why is the success of the Predators and how they're selling out games. And for that matter, how the entire state, even around here, focused in on the Predators during their run for the Stanley Cup. Not this past season, but the season before, even before the Stanley Cup run, Predators sold out 35 of 41 games. Interesting. And I've always thought that hockey and soccer did have some similarities. You score one at a time, you score goals. It's a very free-flowing sport, whereas you can score a baseball game, what with its pause play. And really, go through the scorecard, years later and really be able to track everything that happened. I can replay this in my mind. Soccer, less so. I mean, halfback attempts to kick the striker, fullback heads the ball away, etc. It's just not the same. And trying to write that down as it happens, what symbols do you use? You don't score a soccer game, which is one of the drawbacks of the sport, in my opinion. But nevertheless, it's also one of the drawbacks of hockey, really. I've seen people try to score a hockey game, and although they do a good job, boy, is it really boom, boom, boom. It's tough to do that with a free-flowing sport. Anyway, John Ingram, who is the man, he's one of the more prominent people in Nashville, he's a billionaire, and he's going to be the guy that really brings the MLS to Nashville. Ingram is the person that really sold the MLS on Nashville, not only with his wealth, but also, I think, with the influence and the success of the Predators. And so it's only the 29th largest media market in the country is Nashville, and that's small compared to the other teams in the MLS. Other cities that we're looking at, Detroit, which is larger, they're still a top 10. Are they still a top 10? If they're not, they just fell out of it. I mean, we all know of the struggles of Detroit. Cincinnati, which is a similar size to Nashville, was also looking at a franchise. It would be in northern Kentucky. But, still, it's Nashville that's going to get the first one. And I ask these two things then. One, what will be the following of the sport in the Tri-Cities? I mean, will we have the games televised, that sort of thing? Will there be more interest, more attention in the local media, be it on this show, newspapers, what have you? Barbershop conversation, so to speak. But the second thing that I do ask is, and I mentioned this on the show before, the USL, United Soccer League. Technically, right now, Nashville SC, by the way, this team is supposed to kick off in 2020, this MLS franchise. But they've got an expansion USL team that's going to kick off next season, does Nashville. Okay, that's not bad. A little bit of a matinee minor league team before. Now, are they going to stay in Nashville, the minor league team, and just have that many more events? Or could it possibly be relocated? How about relocating to the Tri-Cities? You've already got a pretty good venue there at ETSU. And by this, I mean Summers-Taylor Stadium. And soccer was pushed very well. Let's face it, once upon a time, ETSU traded their football program for a soccer team. There is some interest. I mean, I keep looking at people, and more than that, although most of the markets, and I said this before, in the USL are bigger than the Tri-Cities, it's still a top 100 market, and it's very comparable in terms of market size and really being spread out to the Rio Grande Valley, which is where there is a USL team. Yeah, Rio Grande Valley. It's a market I'm familiar with. I used to be the announcer for a baseball team in Harlingen, Texas. Well, I just say if it can happen there, it can certainly happen in the Tri-Cities. And it often behooves a franchise, especially one that's trying to perhaps be a regional franchise, and really also sell the sport, if you can have a minor league franchise that is in the region. You become then a regional franchise. Look at the location of the Tri-Cities, and you can see that it is centrally located to many surrounding USL franchises. It's an easy trip. See where I'm going with this? When it's come to minor league sports, we've had bad semi-pro. Couldn't even get a CBA team or anything like that in Johnson City. We've had the Appalachian League. And the Appalachian League, I'm sorry, but that's bottom of the barrel minor league baseball. Market's top 100. Wouldn't you like, instead of bottom of the barrel minor league sports, top of the barrel minor league sports? Sports that would be playing teams from major metropolitan areas. A league that could go a long way to putting the Tri-Cities on the map. What would it mean for the Tri-Cities to have a USL team that Knoxville or Roanoke didn't have? I think it would be tremendous positive. Tri-Cities would be something other than a place to go to the bathroom between Roanoke and Knoxville, you know? And I know that people, what about BMS, Marky? Yeah, what about BMS? Why not capitalize on that? I'm interested. I'm going to throw this out. We're going to try to get some people on from Nashville, for that matter, the MLS and the organization there, to come on Tri-City Sports Now and talk about this, what it would be the future of right now Nashville SC and their USL affiliation. I would imagine that the team, once the MLS comes, would move. But where to? Why not here? Facilities are here. It's a market just bursting to try to be cosmopolitan. And boy, that would really make a cultural shift, wouldn't it, into the area? And it would be the team of choice for a new generation of Tri-City Sports Now, or Tri-City Sports fans. Be a little less bluegrass, a little more rock and roll. Boy, it sounded like Donnie and Marie right there. That's pretty bad. But I will just tell you that, maybe it's time for the Tri-Cities to become more cosmopolitan, and maybe it can happen with pro soccer. Second hour football recruiting coming back.
1420.